If I told you that Pontius Pilate regretted his role in the death of Jesus long after the crucifixion, what would you think? And what if I told you that Pilate, the very man who oversaw Jesus' trial and crucifixion, wrote a letter to none other than the Roman Emperor Tiberius? In this letter, he didn't just recount the trial's events but spoke of Jesus' miraculous powers, his profound teachings, and, incredibly, his resurrection. Why would Pilate, a high-ranking Roman official, write such a letter? What did he hope to achieve, and why did he bother describing Jesus' life and miracles in detail? In his letter, Pilate seems almost compelled to tell the emperor about Jesus, going beyond just the trial to describe his appearance, his influence, and his words. It's as though Pilate wanted to make sure the emperor himself understood that this was no ordinary man. So, what does this letter reveal? The letter begins formally, with Pilate addressing Caesar, Pontius Pilate to Tiberius Caesar, the emperor, greeting. He immediately dives into describing a man named Jesus Christ, whom he calls a man of great virtue. Pilate notes that Jesus was still alive and active among the people in Judea, with Gentiles accepting him as a prophet. But to his closest followers, Jesus was known as none other than the Son of God. Pilate even acknowledges that Jesus held great power, claiming he could raise the dead and cure all manner of diseases. Then, Pilate offers a remarkable description of Jesus' physical appearance, painting a vivid picture for the emperor. He writes that Jesus was somewhat tall, with a presence that evoked both love and fear. Pilate describes Jesus' hair as the color of chestnut, straight near the ears and curling as it reached his shoulders. His face, Pilate notes, was flawless, beautified with a lovely red. His nose and mouth were perfectly formed, and his beard, similar in color to his hair, was not too long but forked slightly at the end. Pilate's letter mentions that Jesus' eyes were gray, clear, and quick in reproving, suggesting a gaze that could be both gentle and piercing. This level of detail is astounding, especially considering Pilate's role. Why would a governor of Judea, caught in political turmoil, take such care in describing Jesus? It's almost as if Pilate wanted Caesar to understand that this man, Jesus, held an aura, a presence that was unforgettable. Pilate even goes as far as to mention Jesus' voice, describing him as courteous, wise, and modest. He paints Jesus as a figure of remarkable gravity and maturity, noting that, unlike most men, it was rare to see him laugh, though many had seen him weep. Pilate emphasizes that Jesus' body was proportioned excellently, and his hands and arms were pleasing to behold. Such words are not typical for a report from a Roman official, especially when describing someone sentenced to death. Now, Pilate's letter doesn't stop at Jesus' physical appearance. He recounts the tension surrounding Jesus' trial, explaining how the chief priests and religious leaders, driven by envy, brought Jesus to him, accusing him with weak charges. Pilate recalls questioning Jesus, who responded to each question with a calmness and humility that left Pilate in awe. At one point, Pilate asked Jesus if he was a king, and Jesus replied, "I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world." When Pilate pressed further, asking if he were a god, Jesus answered, "You say it, for I am the truth and the life, I am the good shepherd." Even as the accusations mounted, Jesus maintained a mysterious authority that left Pilate both intrigued and unsettled. But the account doesn't end there. Pilate describes an incredible scene, the moment of Jesus' crucifixion. He recalls that as Jesus hung on the cross, darkness covered the land, even though it was midday. The sun seemed to fail, and stars appeared in the sky, while the moon looked as if it had turned to blood. Pilate notes that, at that moment, graves opened, and the dead rose, appearing to many in Jerusalem. It was a moment unlike any other, a scene that defied nature and logic. Pilate admits that he felt deeply disturbed by these events, so much so that he hastened to take water and wash his hands of the blood of this just person, a gesture to absolve himself of the responsibility. But despite his actions, it seems Pilate couldn't shake the feeling that he had sentenced an innocent man, perhaps even someone beyond human comprehension, to his death. In this letter, Pilate's words paint a picture of a man who is haunted, perhaps even transformed, by his encounter with Jesus. It's as if he wants the emperor to know that this man, this Jesus, left a mark on him, one that even the power of Rome could not erase. As Pilate's letter continues, we see him recount not only the trial but also the underlying tensions that made his position so challenging. He describes Judea as a place of relentless unrest, a province where rebellion brewed just beneath the surface. Pilate admits to Caesar that he struggled to keep order, with few resources and only a small military presence at his command. In his words, "Of all conquered cities, Jerusalem was the most difficult to govern." The local population's fierce loyalty to their customs and beliefs seemed to challenge Roman authority daily. Pilate notes that he lived in constant fear of an uprising, feeling the pressure of a hostile crowd that could turn violent at any moment. This background gives us a glimpse into the turmoil surrounding Jesus' trial and why the religious leaders' demands put Pilate in a difficult position. They accused Jesus, presenting him as a threat to Roman rule, yet Pilate saw him differently. According to Pilate, Jesus did not show any rebellion against Rome. He even seemed to speak more like a friend of Rome than an enemy. Pilate remembers a moment when he observed Jesus speaking calmly to a crowd by the pool of Siloam. There, surrounded by people, Jesus addressed them with an authority that didn't need force or violence. Pilate was struck by his composure and the almost celestial aspect of his golden-colored hair and serene face. It was a stark contrast to the intense, dark expressions of the crowd around him. Pilate goes on to mention that he was initially wary of Jesus. Rumors had reached him of a young man from Galilee preaching a new message with a powerful conviction. In his role, Pilate had to be cautious of anyone who might incite the people to rise against Roman rule. Yet, the more he learned about Jesus, the more his fears were eased. Instead of rallying the people against Rome, Jesus preached love, forgiveness, and humility. Pilate writes, "I was apprehensive at first, but soon my fears were dispelled." He saw that Jesus' message was not one of rebellion but one that seemed, strangely, to calm the people. One day, as Pilate continued to observe Jesus from a distance, he instructed his secretary, Menelaus, to join the crowd and report back on what Jesus was saying. Menelaus, a man deeply familiar with Judea and its people, was loyal to Pilate and skilled in gathering information. Upon returning, Menelaus shared with Pilate words he had never expected to hear. Jesus spoke about giving tribute to Caesar and about God in a way that resonated deeply with Pilate. Jesus had said, "Render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." For Pilate, this statement was extraordinary. Here was a man who commanded influence, yet he spoke of honoring both God and Caesar. This wasn't the message of a revolutionary but of a man who respected authority even as he proclaimed a higher truth. Pilate was moved by Jesus' wisdom, granting him the freedom to continue his teachings despite complaints from the local leaders. He could have arrested Jesus at any time, but he chose not to. He saw in Jesus not a political threat, but a voice that offered something new to the people, a voice that didn't align with the priests and religious authorities. Pilate's letter reveals that the religious elite were enraged by Jesus, but it wasn't his disobedience that offended them, it was his challenge to their authority. Jesus' words cut through their hypocrisy, his parables exposing their superficial piety. For instance, Pilate notes that Jesus would often criticize the Pharisees and scribes, calling them a brood of vipers and whitewashed tombs, outwardly beautiful but corrupt within. As complaints against Jesus mounted, Pilate felt his position growing precarious. Each day, more voices demanded action against Jesus. Pilate recalls that, while many of the poorer citizens admired Jesus, the wealthy and powerful feared him. To Pilate, this fear seemed almost irrational, considering Jesus' simple life and peaceful message. But he recognized that his words carried weight and penetrated the hearts of those who clung to their power. Eventually, the pressure became too intense. In his letter, Pilate confesses that he felt cornered by the demands of the religious leaders who warned of dire consequences if he failed to act. Pilate was reminded that Jerusalem had a history of stoning those who claimed to be prophets, and he feared that the unrest might spiral into violence. Knowing he lacked the military strength to suppress an insurrection, Pilate faced an impossible decision. Though he found no fault in Jesus, he realized that sacrificing him might be the only way to preserve the fragile peace of Jerusalem. In his letter, Pilate's words seem to reveal regret, a sadness that lingers as he recounts the events leading to Jesus' crucifixion. The final decision to hand over Jesus was not one Pilate made lightly. He portrays it as a choice forced upon him, a political move to prevent further chaos. But as he reflects on the moment, there's a sense that he knew he was condemning an innocent man, a man unlike any he had ever encountered, a man whose presence alone stirred something within him. Pilate's account continues, and he describes the day of Jesus' crucifixion in vivid detail, a day that would be etched into his memory. As he writes to Caesar, Pilate explains that the moment Jesus was sentenced, an overwhelming sense of darkness enveloped the city. According to Pilate's letter, the sun disappeared, and an eerie darkness fell over Jerusalem at noon, a phenomenon he describes as unsettling and unnatural. Stars were visible in the sky, as if it were nighttime, and the moon appeared red, as if it had turned to blood. Pilate's words reveal his astonishment, acknowledging that this darkness felt like a sign of divine displeasure, as though the heavens themselves mourned the death of Jesus. As the crucifixion continued, the earth itself seemed to respond in protest. Pilate recounts that an earthquake shook the city, cracking stones and breaking tombs open. Remarkably, he notes that some of the dead rose from their graves, appearing to many people in the city. This spectacle left the onlookers in shock, fearful and awestruck, unable to fully grasp the magnitude of what was happening. It was as if creation itself was reacting to the death of Jesus in a way Pilate had never witnessed before. In an act of desperation, Pilate writes that he immediately sought water to wash his hands, a gesture to publicly distance himself from the responsibility of this execution. He describes it as an attempt to cleanse himself of the blood of this just person. Yet even this act couldn't erase the feeling that he had been part of a tragedy far greater than any political decision. Pilate's words seem almost haunted, as if he recognized that no amount of washing could truly absolve him of the decision he had made. Pilate's letter then reflects on the reaction of the Jewish leaders. He notes that they seemed unmoved by the supernatural events, determined to see Jesus put to death no matter the signs around them. Despite the darkness, the earthquake, and the other signs, they maintained their composure, their anger unshaken. For Pilate, this lack of reaction only added to his inner conflict, a feeling that perhaps he had been manipulated by their demands and that these leaders had a deeper agenda. Pilate continues to describe the figure of Jesus, highlighting details that seem to weigh heavily on his mind. He describes Jesus as a man whose presence commanded respect, a figure who, even in the face of death, displayed a calmness that Pilate found unsettling yet deeply impactful. Jesus had responded to Pilate's questions with dignity, humility, and a strange authority that left Pilate questioning his own actions. As Pilate relives these moments, it's clear he feels that Jesus' death was more than a simple execution, it was the ending of something sacred, perhaps even divine. In the closing lines of this part of the letter, Pilate acknowledges that he never forgot the events of that day. The darkness, the earthquake, the calm resignation of Jesus, and the bitter determination of the religious leaders all left a lasting impression on him. Pilate's words suggest a man troubled, someone who sensed that he had taken part in an act that would echo through history. His letter reveals a deep regret, a lingering sorrow for the role he played in the death of an innocent man, a man who, in Pilate's mind, may have been more than just a prophet. Pilate's letter doesn't end with the crucifixion. In fact, it dives deeper into his reflections on the aftermath and his view of the future implications. Pilate writes to Caesar with a sense of foreboding, hinting that the events surrounding Jesus might one day change the course of history. He even admits that in moments of despair, he almost curses the day he accepted the position of governor of Judea, a province he describes as exceptionally difficult to govern. The turmoil surrounding Jesus only added to his frustrations, and he feared that these tensions would have lasting consequences, perhaps not only for Judea but for Rome itself. Pilate describes how, even after the crucifixion, whispers of Jesus' resurrection began to circulate. Pilate had thought that Jesus' death would bring peace, that the unrest would settle. Instead, rumors spread that Jesus had risen from the dead, sightings of him were reported, and stories of his miracles intensified. Pilate confesses that he was deeply troubled by these reports, wondering if he had witnessed something far beyond his understanding. He goes on to mention the unrest that continued in Jerusalem. Although the religious leaders had achieved their goal of eliminating Jesus, they couldn't control the growing influence of his followers. Pilate notes that the people seemed even more emboldened after his death, as if the idea of Jesus had only grown stronger. To Pilate, it was baffling. How could the death of one man inspire such resilience among his followers? He reflects that perhaps Jesus' teachings contained a power that could not be silenced, a message that resonated in ways he couldn't comprehend. In a fascinating turn, Pilate expresses regret not only for sentencing Jesus but for failing to understand his true significance. He admits to Caesar that he might have underestimated Jesus, that there was something undeniably profound about him. Pilate's words reveal an internal struggle as he grapples with the thought that Jesus might have been more than just a man. It's a glimpse into a mind conflicted, a man who was torn between his duty to Rome and an inexplicable sense of reverence for the one he sentenced to die. In the final paragraphs of this section, Pilate acknowledges that his decision to crucify Jesus haunts him still. He confesses that he often replays the events of that day, questioning his own judgment and wondering if he missed a chance to understand something greater. It's a raw admission of doubt and regret from a man who had the power of life and death in his hands but now finds himself powerless to escape the weight of his own conscience. In the next part of his letter, Pilate introduces a significant piece of physical evidence, an artifact that modern historians have come to know as the Pilate Stone. This stone, discovered centuries later near Caesarea Maritima in Israel, bears an inscription that identifies Pilate as the prefect of Judea. It serves as a rare archaeological confirmation of Pilate's existence and his role in Roman administration at the time of Jesus. Pilate's letter, in mentioning this stone, suggests he wanted to leave behind a tangible record of his governorship, perhaps to preserve his name and authority for future generations. Pilate explains that he dedicated this stone in honor of Emperor Tiberius, inscribing it with the words, "To the divine Augusti, this Tiberium, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea." This inscription not only confirms his role but also his loyalty to the emperor, which Pilate highlights throughout his letter. Yet, as he writes to Caesar, there is a sense that Pilate is aware of the irony, that while he honored the emperor with the stone, he became forever linked to the crucifixion of Jesus, a name that would be remembered long after Tiberius and even Rome itself faded from history. The Pilate stone, which was discovered embedded in a staircase leading to a Roman theater, carries a message Pilate never intended. Although it was a dedication to Caesar, its survival has linked Pilate's name indelibly to the story of Jesus. Pilate's letter to Caesar ends with a somber reflection on the stone's purpose, as if he understood that history would remember him not as a loyal Roman official but as the man who condemned Jesus to the cross. In the final sentences of his letter, Pilate acknowledges that this artifact, the Pilate stone, might one day serve as proof of his own existence and his connection to Jesus. It's almost as if he senses that his name will forever be tied to that of Jesus, and that no matter how many times he washes his hands, he can never wash away the memory of that fateful decision. His closing words to Caesar are filled with a resigned acceptance, as if he knows he will be remembered not for his dedication to Rome but for the single act that changed history. Pilate's letter to Tiberius, combined with the archaeological evidence of the Pilate stone, leaves us with a haunting image of a man caught between duty and conscience, power and powerlessness. His account provides a glimpse into the mind of the man who authorized one of the most significant events in human history, and it serves as a reminder of the profound impact that a single decision can have on the world. As we reflect on Pilate's letter and the story it tells, it becomes clear that he recognized Jesus as someone unique, perhaps even divine. Pilate, who held the power to govern, to command, and to control, found himself unable to shake the feeling that he had encountered something beyond his understanding. His words paint a picture of a man haunted by doubt and regret, someone who felt the weight of his actions long after they were done. The Pilate stone and the letter together provide a rare historical lens into the life of Jesus from the perspective of a Roman official. Pilate's account of Jesus' appearance, his demeanor, and his words reveal that he was captivated by this man who, despite being condemned, seemed untouched by fear or anger. Pilate's choice to crucify Jesus may have been a political one, a way to maintain order, but his words suggest that he knew it was a choice that would carry consequences far beyond the boundaries of Judea. Before we close, consider this: Pilate's letter, whether fully accurate or embellished, serves as a reminder of the lasting impact that Jesus has had on the world. His life and death have been chronicled, analyzed, and remembered for over 2,000 years. The Pilate stone, hidden in plain sight for centuries, was uncovered as a testament to the existence of the man who sentenced Jesus. And today, it stands as a silent witness, a link between the ancient world and the enduring story of faith that Jesus inspired. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history, mystery, and faith. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth explorations of history's greatest stories and mysteries. Until next time, may you find peace, wisdom, and inspiration in the words and life of Jesus Christ. God bless you, and amen.